Today's video is part 2 discussing the differences between the different Saxon math edition books. We're going to be talking about that in this video, so stay tuned. Hi there, my name is Karen. Welcome back to our channel called Our House, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to go from questions to confidence when it comes to the Robinson curriculum, I'm here to answer questions. And one of the big questions is, which edition should I use? Now, I covered that in more detail in part 1, so I hope that you will go check it out. I will link a card to that video above. And we talked about all the way from Saxon 5.4 all the way to 8.7. In this video, we're going to pick it up with Algebra half all the way to calculus. And where my information comes from is from two sources. One is Matthew Robinson, of course, one of the original users of the Robinson curriculum, and also by a gentleman by the name of Art Reed, which many of you in the homeschool circles know of. So that is where this information comes from. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so let's talk about the first book that comes after 8.7 from the last video that I did, and that is Algebra half. So this is John Saxon's version of pre-algebra, and the changes with this book along the years is that it started to include calculator problems, which if you're doing the Robinson curriculum, you know that they do not recommend that you use calculators at all until you have gone through all the books, through all the math books. So Matthew Robinson's recommendation is, if you're using another version other than the first edition, is that only use the calculator on problems that are absolutely necessary. So try to stay away from it as much as possible. Now, Art Reed recommends that you choose the third edition, because the third edition is the one that has those little reference numbers on each problem, like you've heard me talk about before, and that really saves a lot of time. See, this second edition doesn't have that. And again, what I'm talking about is when you look at a problem and it gives you a little reference number of where you can find that problem, how to work that style problem. So that's very helpful doing the self-taught method. So first edition, second edition, you don't have that. That starts with third edition. Another thing that I want to inform you about is this teacher's edition. I favor teacher's editions in the younger books like 5.4, 6.5, 7.6 because it can be really hard to keep track of those answer keys. They can get lost. They're not as sturdy. They can get destroyed. However, once you get to this point, Algebra half, you really need a solutions manual. And the teacher's edition just gives you the answers. That's it, just the answers, not how to work the problem. So at this stage, you really want the solutions manual. This actually shows you how a problem is worked out. You want to be careful that the answer key matches the textbook. And that itself could get a little tricky sometimes, finding those right answer keys, but I have some resources that I will list in the description below. Now, Art Reed recommends that you use the more stronger academic third edition. And really the only big disclaimer is not to use the fourth edition. Whatever you do, just don't use the fourth edition of Algebra 1 because that is where they removed the geometry. And so what the committee wanted to do is have an extra book, a geometry book, in between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. However, this does not go with the Saxon methodology. They want the geometry incorporated and working through it in the Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and then from there going to advanced mathematics. So whatever you do, just try to stay away from the fourth edition. Matthew Robinson, the only disclaimer is beware of using calculators. Try not to. Now, the advice from Art Reed is to use the third edition. All right, so now let's talk about Algebra 2. Same disclaimer for Matthew Robinson. Try not to use a calculator unless you absolutely have to with the problem. You really only need maybe the most inexpensive scientific calculator for this book. And Art Reed, he recommends the third edition because again, that one has the concept numbers underneath each problem. You can also use the solutions manual for a third edition for the second edition. That would work fine. And one big disclaimer that Art Reed talks about is not using a fourth edition because that's where it took out all of the geometry and introduced a separate geometry book, which the Robinson curriculum doesn't do it that way at all. If they go from an Algebra half book to geometry book to then an Algebra 2 book, by the time they get to advanced mathematics, they're going to have a hard time because they haven't had enough exposure and practice to geometry. It's better when it's incorporated already like this in Algebra 2. Then they go from this book right to Advanced Mathematics. And again, this teacher's edition just has the answers in the back. So if you want to see how the problem is worked out, you're going to need to buy a solutions manual. Okay, so now let's talk about Advanced Mathematics. This should be used after Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, second or third editions. That will give you a smooth transition over. After they complete this book, it would be as if they completed the second semester in high school geometry. Now, Art Reed recommends that you not use what I have in my hands here, the older first edition, but rather the second edition. And again, with the teacher's manual, you just have the answers in the back. You really need at this point the solutions manual. And one change at this stage is that the concept reference numbers on the problems are now in the solutions manual versus underneath the problem. Now, the last book is the calculus book, which I'm going to pretend to be holding right here because I have not purchased it yet. All the books that I have purchased very inexpensively. I try not to pay more than $7 per book or solutions manual. And that's just because I take my time looking at homeschool resource centers, used book sales, my favorite places to buy books like Aba Books or Thrift Books sometimes has them, eBay, sometimes they pop up on OfferUp and places like that. So I just take my time sourcing them. Really, this whole collection that I have did not cost me much at all. Now, Matthew Robinson said that this book actually had the most changes. The first edition calculus book is very good. However, it does miss subjects that are usually taught in the last term of college level calculus course. So students who were taking the Calculus BC placement exam test usually had to learn a few things that were not taught in the books. So a pair of teachers realized that there was some gaps in this calculus book, and so they revised it for the second edition. So recommend the second edition. The only downside though was that they also incorporated calculator problems, but the benefits of the second edition outweigh the negatives. So better to go with the second than the first. Art Reed's advice, pretty much the same thing. It does make a note that at this stage they want you to have a graphing calculator. However, he says the problems can be worked out with a scientific calculator, which is a lot less expensive, and they should have some kind of a course or lesson on how to use a graphing calculator before they use it for this book. That is it for this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you found this information useful, helpful. I will put a lot of links in the description below where you can read this information again for yourself and my favorite places to find these editions. And I recommend again that you go and watch the first video that talks a little bit more about the Robinson methodology, what Saxon math books are included, because not all of them are. There's a specific list. And just talking a little bit more about the importance or lack of importance of which edition you use. So I hope you'll go check it out right now, and I will see you in another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.